The music of Super Mario 64. When I listen to the Super Mario 64 soundtrack, a few words repeatedly cycle through my mind: imagination, whimsy, and wonder. And also extreme debilitating existential dread. But mainly imagination and wonder, so let's just focus on those. Anyway, if you take a closer look at these words, you'll find that they're each associated with something that every single person on this planet has experienced: being a kid. And it's this sensational, childlike essence that is at the heart of the Super Mario 64 soundtrack. Whether it's the songs that elicit pure energy and excitement, or the music that encourages curiosity and contemplation, or even the heavy, dramatic tracks. Simply put, every single song in the soundtrack is a unique reflection of what it feels like to be young, creating a dynamic musical experience bursting with awe and wonder. Super Mario 64 is one of the most celebrated video games of all time, thanks to its revolutionary gameplay and unforgettable level design. But these two major elements would not have the same impact if it weren't for the incredible music bringing it all together. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. Right now, I'm going to take some time to review, reflect, and celebrate the soundtrack to Super Mario 64. This is VGM Quest.
Here we go!
But before we get started, I think it's important to have some context. And for that, let's take a look at the back of the box. Mario is super in a whole new way, combining the finest 3D graphics ever developed for a video game and an explosive soundtrack. Super Mario 64 becomes a new standard for video games. It's packed with bruising battles, daunting obstacle courses, and underwater adventures. Retrieve the Power Stars from their hidden locations and confront your arch nemesis, Bowser, King of the Koopas. Oh, that's cool. They actually mentioned the soundtrack on the back of the box, and they described it as explosive. That's actually a pretty good adjective to use. I'm gonna jot that one down to use later in the script. Okay, there. Anyway, I feel like this is a great setup for the soundtrack's context. It's richly descriptive and has a really fun tone. And now, with this context in mind, let's get into the meat and potatoes. I mean, let's get into the green shells and mushrooms? The Super Mario 64 soundtrack doesn't really commit to a singular genre or tone. Instead, it showcases a wide range of genres and musical stylings. However, there are two recurring genres that weave their way in and out of the track list to varying degrees. The most prevalent being contemporary classical music, incorporating lush strings and warm brass instrumentation. And also drum and bass, featuring fast-paced syncopated drum beats and low melodic bass rhythms. And speaking of the instruments, there are a handful of them that make their appearance regularly throughout the soundtrack. In most songs, you'll come across the drums, strings, horns, and the electric keys, all leaving their distinct musical marks. But like I've said before, the Super Mario 64 soundtrack dips its toes into a whole mess of genres. One minute, you'll be bopping your head to some jazz and funk. And next thing you know, you're tapping your foot to some bluegrass. From a musical standpoint, it's all over the place. But from a broader, more thematic perspective, I really feel like it's quite cohesive. Because of the soundtrack's dedication to creating multiple self-contained songs with their own distinctive musical environments, the Super Mario 64 soundtrack as a whole, in my opinion, starts to feel like a representation of pure, unrestricted, youthful imagination. Okay, here, I'll use an analogy. Imagine being 5 years old again. You open up your toy box and grab all your favorite toys. Maybe one of them is an old doll. Then you pull out some Legos. And that big car is speaking to you right now too, so you grab that. Now, with your favorite toys in hand, the fun begins. So, what do these toys have in common? Exactly. Nothing. but you can bet your 5-year-old behind that you're still about to spend an entire afternoon playing with these things, making the toys interact, making up stories, and having the time of your life while doing it. Imagine this scenario transformed into music. This is what the Super Mario 64 soundtrack feels like. Pure, limitless fun, and unbiased imagination. And who better to make the music sound and feel the way it does than the one and only Koji Kondo. Being one of the most recognizable names in the industry, Koji Kondo has composed some of the most well-known songs in some of the most well-known games, from The Legend of Zelda to, of course, Super Mario Bros., including its main theme and underground theme. In my Ocarina of Time soundtrack video, I spoke on Koji Kondo's knack for composing strong, memorable melodies, but his talents don't end there. The music of Super Mario 64 proves that Kondo knows how to go beyond writing notes on a staff, and that he's able to compose an entire soundtrack under a focused, overarching tone, while simultaneously writing its songs in a broad range of styles. As a composer myself, let me just say, that is no easy feat. When we're young, everything, big and small, good or bad, leaves a lasting impression on us. And we're at this magical time in our lives where our imagination can run wild and our curiosity is at an all-time high. And throughout the 36 compositions that make up Super Mario 64 soundtrack, it's this childlike spirit that Koji Kondo is able to so creatively convey. One notable way he achieves this is by making each song feel highly sensational and energetic, reflecting how a young mind would perceive the world around it. And this is best expressed in the soundtrack's energetic tracks. Super Mario 64's energetic tracks are lively, colorful, and explosive. I knew I'd find a good place for that. Anyway, to convey this energy, I think there's no better place to start than the opening title theme. Being quite possibly the most recognizable 7-note sequence in a video game composition, Super Mario 64's title theme immediately grabs our attention and pulls us into its world. It kicks off into a fresh interpretation of the iconic Super Mario Bros. Theme, played on the steel drums, backed by the organ and a syncopated 90s-style drum and bass rhythm. This is a great introduction into the soundtrack. It quickly establishes a comfort and familiarity with its melody, while introducing completely new musical elements and instrumentation, in order to illustrate that there will be new and exciting things to come throughout this nearly hour-long musical experience. And from one iconic theme to another, there's the Super Mario 64 main theme. If you ask just about anyone to name the first song that comes to mind when they think of Super Mario 64, it would almost always be this one. And for good reason. It's filled to the brim with personality and charm. Fusing elements of funk and jazz, the Super Mario 64 main theme features a cool, mid-tempo drum beat paired with a choppy melodic bass part just slapping away. And we can't forget the exceptionally catchy synth melody bouncing around throughout the track. In the song's first section, the melody is accompanied by an energetic brass ensemble. This is followed by the song's second section, in which the brass ensemble takes the lead and opens up the track with its drawn-out sequence of notes. And really bringing home that funk vibe is the main theme's third and final section. The brass instruments shift into a vigorous 3-note rhythm sequence, backed by that same funky drum beat and slap bass part. Then it transitions back into the first section, This song is highly energetic and just feels so good to listen to. Continuing on, we've got Snow Mountain. This song feels bright and cheerful. It features a fun accordion melody backed by a quick, bouncy horn section to add texture. As the second section comes around, the track takes a calmer approach, and the warm brass ensemble taking on a counter melody. And then, there's my favorite part of the track. As a counter to how the rest of Snow Mountain feels, this short third section feels a little mischievous, with its use of seventh chords on the mandolin and wailing horns. To me, the mandolin represents a kid getting into a little bit of trouble, and the horns represent the parents telling the kid to stop misbehaving. And then, as such, the song gets back on track again. Alright, now when it comes to Super Mario 64's up-tempo tracks, nothing compares to the pure, unrestricted excitement and energy of Slider. This song does more than just dip its toes into the bluegrass genre. It dives in head first, or better yet, it belly flops in. It features a frantically plucked banjo and an energetic fiddle accompanied by a bouncy bass rhythm to keep the music rolling along at a brisk pace. There's also prominent whistling in this tune, something you don't commonly hear in a video game soundtrack. And just imagine being unfamiliar with Super Mario 64 and hearing this song. And then I told you that there was a level that consisted of Mario being chased by a hillbilly clown through a giant farm where you have to dodge pigs and cows to make it to the end of the level. And this was the song for it. I mean, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't even think twice about it. Simply put, Slider knows exactly what it is. Chaotic, exciting, and a little crazy. This track has so much energy that it almost feels illegal. Now, before we move on to the next song, I've got something pretty interesting to share. Believe it or not, the last 3 songs I just covered are all the same song, each being an iteration of the Super Mario 64 main theme, incorporating the same melody and everything. It's true! Take a listen. This is where Koji Kondo really shows his musical chops. He's able to take a single theme and transform it into 3 completely different styles of music. It's absolutely incredible. Another classic Mario theme returns with Powerful Mario. It opens with a light, airy keyboard part trickling throughout the first few bars, immediately laying out the song's dreamlike landscape. Making their way through the entire track are a smooth string section and a rhythmic acoustic guitar helping keep tempo. This song has a simple 2-chord sequence, alternating between D minor 7 and C major 7. These chords sequenced together give Powerful Mario a serene and surreal atmosphere. When it comes to capturing the feeling of childlike wonder, Powerful Mario stands above the rest. Remember just a second ago when I said Koji Kondo reused that theme earlier? Well, he actually reuses themes all the time. He does it 17 times throughout the soundtrack. So here's another one. The Metallic Mario takes the powerful Mario theme and completely flips it on its head. As the title would suggest, Metallic Mario gives off an industrial and electric vibe, with a driving drum beat and various syncopated synth rhythms hopping around the track. Metallic Mario also adds that classic synthesized orchestra hit sound as a contrast for the rhythmic organ part. There are lots of little things going on for a song that repeats only every 15 seconds. So, do you kind of hear what I'm talking about? The highly sensationalized atmosphere of Super Mario 64's soundtrack feels like a reflection of those heightened emotions we feel when we're young, from excitement and eagerness to pure energy. As we age, one of the most important things we begin to lose is our genuine sense of wonder and curiosity. It's an integral part of childhood, allowing us to soak in the world around us and make our own unique discoveries. And this is another emotional concept that can be felt through the Super Mario 64 soundtrack, primarily through its more reflective music. Let's talk about the Mellow Tracks. Super Mario 64's Mellow Tracks are slower paced and much calmer in tone, turning to strings and keyboards as their primary instruments of choice. And since we're on the topic of strings, there's no better place to start than opening. It opens with low strings holding a C. The ensemble continues to grow with mid-range strings establishing a hopeful staccato rhythm. This, paired with the slow marching snares, allows for the musical piece to feel like it's leading to something grand and intriguing. And unsurprisingly, yet fittingly so, this song spotlights the soundtrack's primary theme, and for the first time when listening in sequential order, setting the musical foundation of what's to come. My personal favorite part of this piece arrives at the end. The music slowly falls apart and lands on a curious note, taking our anticipation to greater heights. Opening is a musical prologue through and through, and it serves its role flawlessly. Moving on, we've got File Select. There's just something comforting about this song. Maybe it's the warm strings and synth pads that act as a blanket over the song's atmosphere. Or perhaps it's the pan flute making its way through the song with its uplifting melody. File Select brings a hopeful spirit to the Super Mario 64 soundtrack. With this, it also carries a sort of innocence and curiosity, wonderfully displaying the soundtrack's connection to the essence of childhood. Speaking of curiosity, you can't forget about Inside the Castle Walls. This classically influenced piece begins with a playful string section that reverberates throughout the depths of the song. This ensemble also incorporates a short plucked string sequence to then be overtaken by the initial string section once more. A wonderful, light call and response. The track then transitions into its second section, creating a smooth backdrop of low strings joined by a fairly busy but intentional melody. Whether it's the song's musical directions or its emphasis on reverb to make it feel like the notes are quite literally bouncing off castle walls, when put together, these elements make for a piece of music that feels regal, grand, and wide in scope. Completely changing direction is Cave Dungeon. All right, now listen, you're not going to believe this, but this song, once again, is a reused theme. Unprecedented, I know, but here we are. Being a complete reimagining of the Super Mario Bros. Underground theme, Cave Dungeon houses an unmistakable rhythm, built up with shakers, bongos, a woodblock, and a low, repetitive synth bass sequence. The iconic melody is played on the bass, Funky and slappy, of course. And as the track progresses, haunting synth pads glue it all together to produce a soundscape that feels subdued and stealth-like. No other song on the Super Mario 64 soundtrack sounds or feels quite like this one. Perhaps the most beautiful melody from the soundtrack is Piranha Plant's Lullaby. There's no way around it. This really is a lullaby. Its beautiful, bell-like melody paints a musical picture of peace and tranquility. It flows into a second section, incorporating a quicker melody with its rapid eighth notes being struck in quick succession. This section ends on a slightly darker note with its clashy chords, before leading back into the main section of the lullaby. It's a welcome addition. Piranha Plant's Lullaby feels safe. It feels like nothing can hurt you. Right? 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 Contrary to many other Nintendo game soundtracks, the Super Mario 64 staff roll music doesn't rehash melodies and motifs heard throughout the entirety of the soundtrack. Instead, it's an all-new piece of music with new musical ideas. Staff roll opens with a simple bongo and shaker, soon joined by a bright keyboard part to fill out the song. Bringing the track's foundation is a modest drum beat, joined by the bass and rhythm guitar. Its melody is uplifting and reflective, fitting for a song that plays during the credits. But in classic Koji Kondo fashion, the song's second section adds a bit of somberness, as a piano melody echoes around other instruments. This really grounds the music in a way that most Super Mario 64 songs don't. It's as if the song is saying, life is full of wonder and possibilities, but things get hard sometimes too. Soon, the first section repeats, adding the pan flute and a subtle horn section. A powerful key change is then introduced, but not long before the tune comes to a close. My favorite part about Staff Roll is that it ends how it begins. All the instruments fade into the distance until all that's left is that same expressive keyboard that we heard from the beginning. It feels deeply reflective and musically pensive as it plays through the song's final few chords. And it is beautiful. The keyboard continues to play a prominent role in this next song. Not only that, but it also opens with the most iconic keyboard part in all of gaming. Quite possibly the most celebrated song in the entire Super Mario 64 soundtrack is Dire Dire Docks. It's one of those songs that speaks to anyone who listens to it. It captures the hearts of gamers who grew up with Super Mario 64, but also resonates with musically inclined gamers on a different level due to its unique tone and atmosphere. Dire Dire Docks is broken down into two primary parts. The first section heavily features the electric keys as it plays a haunting, reflective melody drenched in melancholy, as its chord progression slowly descends down the keyboard. And to contrast this, the song's second section takes a positive turn and evokes feelings of comfort and serenity. As the track continues, it slowly begins to layer, adding subtle strings for texture. And later on, a fast and colorful drum beat gives the song a greater sense of rhythm and excitement. Dire Dire Docks offers a distinct, calm, and dreamlike listening experience unlike any other song on the Super Mario 64 soundtrack. Honestly, it paints such a vivid picture that I'm so surprised it has no lyrics. Well, I guess it's time to fix that. I'm going swimming in my favorite place right now, yeah. And I'm really wet. This water sure is wet. Now there's a frickin' scary eel rushing towards me. I guess my time has come. There's just something about Dire Dire Docks. This one is my personal favorite. By mixing in calmer songs with its higher energy songs, the Super Mario 64 soundtrack benefits from being musically diverse. But on a grander scale, these songs allow the soundtrack to broaden in its overall tone by musically expressing the fundamental childhood experiences of curiosity and discovery. During our formative years, everything in the world around us is exciting and new, from the places we go, to the friends we make, to the new toys we get. There's an endless ocean of new experiences waiting for us around every corner, every day. So how does a kid choose what to do next? Well, they usually don't. A child's attention can shift all over the place very quickly. And I feel like this theme represents the remaining handful of tracks in Super Mario 64. At this point, it is no secret that the Super Mario 64 soundtrack offers a wide variety of genres throughout its nearly hour-long runtime, giving full commitment and no restriction to each individual song's intended musical stylings. And when listening to the soundtrack in order, it provides an ever-changing, theatrical-like listening experience. Take Looping Steps, for example, with its panic-inducing rhythm and anxiously rising melody sequence. Or Lethal Lava Land. Its Middle Eastern-influenced instrumentation creates an isolating and spacious atmosphere. What about Haunted House, with its aggressively bleak and doomful presence and horror soundscapes? Not to mention Merry-Go-Round, taking a seemingly innocent carnival-influenced song and twisting it, adding an eerie feeling with its clashy melody just barely not sitting right on top of its backing chords. And we can't forget Ultimate Koopa. Its Eastern European classical music influence, paired with its humongous-feeling pipe organ, makes for some horrifically foreboding undertones. You know, speaking of horror, we've got to talk about the boss tracks. Let's start with Stage Boss. Super Mario 64 stage boss music, unsurprisingly, feels chaotic, opening with an extremely fast-moving string section that feels out of control and completely random in its performance. The ensemble then transitions into long, drawn-out notes, while the percussion section strikes a quick-paced rhythm, giving the song a sense of erratic movement. Fittingly, this piece of music creates a stress-inducing atmosphere that no other song on the soundtrack can match. Man, Koopa's Road leaves an immediate impression with that intro. And then it's followed by dark synth pads and airy strings, both working together to create a foreboding musical landscape. Also featured is a marching snare rhythm, giving the feeling of progression and movement throughout the track. Its tone builds deep anticipation, which I'm guessing is exactly what Koji Kondo was going for. Because what comes next is, well, Bowser's theme. This track is bursting with aggression and energy. It's got heavy, pounding drums and dark, gnarly riffs filling out the entire track. In other words, this song rocks. And seriously, this riff, it's so good. It sounds like it came straight out of a 70s hard rock song. It eventually transitions into a quick-paced descending sequence of notes, making it feel like things are tumbling down. counter melody is echoed by high synth pads, perfectly countering the low and deep rhythms and thick riffs. Pair all of these elements together, and you've got a song that feels dark, sinister, and intimidating. This song is a welcome departure compared to the many other light-hearted songs scattered throughout the soundtrack. And its tone creates a vivid musical image of just how terrifying things are. It's awesome. Super Mario 64's soundtrack showcases an eclectic mix of songs, all filled with creativity and imagination. But when giving a more intentful listen, it doesn't take very long at all to realize its themes run much deeper. Every single piece of music, each in its own way, beautifully lays down a foundation themed around the essence of childhood, and more importantly, all of the emotions and feelings that come with it. At the heart of the Super Mario 64 soundtrack is exactly what makes being a kid so magical to begin with: the meaningful sense of imagination, whimsy, and limitless wonder. Why is it that I find myself going back to play this decades-old game time and time again? Is it one of my all-time favorites? Of course it is. Does nostalgia play a role? Absolutely. But I believe there's another reason too, something that applies to all of us who are fans of the game. We go back to play Super Mario 64 to relive that piece of our childhood, to go back to a time that felt simpler, easier, and maybe safer. And I truly believe the music from this game is an open invitation to look back and reflect on the importance of our formative, youthful experiences. After all, we wouldn't be who we are today if it weren't for how these core experiences have shaped us, for better or worse. Sure, we're older now, and that toy box we talked about earlier, the one with all those random toys, probably hasn't been opened in decades. But when life gets messy and the time feels right, give a good, full listen to the Super Mario 64 soundtrack. It'll give you a chance to open up that toy box again, even if only for a short while. And if you spend enough time in this musical world, like I have, you just might uncover something greater. That the music from Super Mario 64 itself is one of those very things that helped shape us into who we are today. And that is worth celebrating. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to sit back and watch this 30-minute video about the Super Mario 64 soundtrack. I love it. I love the game. I love the music. I love all kinds of video game music, and that's why I'm here doing VGM Quest. So I just want to thank you for going through this journey with me, because I'm assuming you love talking about video game music too. So I would appreciate it if you'd stick around, subscribe to the channel, because I've got a few more super special soundtracks I want to cover throughout the rest of the year. I've got another N64 game I want to do, but I also have a couple PC games I want to cover. So we're kind of going all over the place on the musical and game spectrum, so I'm super excited about it. But for now, thank you so much for watching VGM Quest, and I'll see you on the next one.